Happy St. Patrick's Day! First off, let me tell you that I'm actually Irish on both sides, and I love Celtic music. There is something about music that brings us closer to each other and helps us come together as a community. It also, however, sometimes has a way of dividing us. For instance, when I lived in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, before I moved out here, I lived half a block from an Irish pub called Molly's, which was my chief source of sustenance, and every St. Patrick's Day, promptly at 7 a.m., the whole neighborhood would be treated to a wake-up call from a bagpiper. I remember one St. Patrick's morning, the first tune on the pipes went like this. And I thought, wait a minute, that's Scotland the Brave. You can't play Scotland the Brave first thing on St. Patrick's Day. Why, I oughta. I nearly stomped down to the pub in order to remedy the situation as any self-respecting put-upon Irishman would. Turn on some music in a car full of people, or watch a Super Bowl halftime show, and you will get a lot of mixed reactions. Like that last Super Bowl, a Canadian artist who calls himself The Weeknd. That's weekend without the third E. Many of my friends on Facebook were posting slick, stylish, best halftime show ever. And I'm thinking, I'm glad so many dancers got this gig, but these songs are weak. Maybe he should just call himself The Weekday, or just Tuesday. But there are certain songs that everyone enjoys. Who could turn their nose up at the last bit of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony with the chorus screeching, Ode to Joy? Or Bach's Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring. Or Carry On My Wayward Son.
Carry on my wayward son.
Be Thou My Vision fits into this category. It's likely my favorite hymn were Anyone to Hold My Feet to the Flame. It's also one of the most beloved hymns of all time. The melody conjures up images of the rolling hills of Eire, making people cry when they hear it, and millions more request it for their funerals. But very few people know the story behind the song. Its history is as ancient and mysterious as the haunting hymn itself. So what is the story behind this legendary hymn? Where did it come from? And, if it's so old, how did it survive to the 21st century? The story behind Be Thou My Vision begins with St. Patrick. Yes, St. Patrick's Day is about more than green beer. Patrick was born in the year 373 of the Common Era along the banks of the River Clyde in what is now called Scotland. So St. Patrick was actually a Scotsman. Perhaps I should just apologize now for the Scotland the Brave quip from earlier. When he was around 16, story goes, raiders descended on his little town and burned his home to the ground. When one of the pirates spotted him in the bushes, he was seized, hauled aboard ship, and taken to Ireland as a slave. Over the years, he learned the Gaelic language and customs. He also became a Christian. The Lord opened my mind to an awareness of my unbelief, he later wrote, in order that I might remember my transgressions and turn with all my heart to the Lord my God. Years later, he managed to escape and return home to his family. While most of us would have just stayed at home, because of a very persuasive dream, Patrick chose to go back to Ireland, back to his captors, and become a missionary. Well, what does that have to do with Be Thou My Vision? In the year 433, according to lore, Patrick boldly and bravely lit and blessed the Paschal fire and the Easter candle during the vigil service on Slane Hill in defiance of the High King Leary, who forbid any other fires while a druidic festival fire, which honored the Celtic sun god Lugh, was burning on the hill of Tara within sight of Slane. Well, Patrick was not intimidated. He made an emphatic statement. Jesus is the light of the world, nobody else, not even Lugh. Years later, an unknown composer wrote a melody in honor of Patrick's heroism. The unknown composer named it after the hill where Patrick shined his light, Slane Hill. The history behind the lyrics is a bit more obscure. The old Irish poem entitled Rope to Mobila is often attributed to an Irish poet from the 6th century named St. Dallan in honor of St. Patrick. The oldest existing copy of St. Dallan's poem comes from the 14th century. Because no other historical evidence connects him to the poem, it's impossible to verify the actual origin of the lyrics. In the original poem, The symbolic use of a battle shield and a sword to invoke the power and protection of God draws from Paul's letter to the Ephesians, which refers to the shield of faith and the sword of the Spirit. Such military symbolism was common in the poetry and hymnology of Christian monasteries of the period due to the prevalence of clan warfare across Ireland. That verse, which is thankfully omitted from most hymnals, goes like this: Be thou my breastplate, my sword for the fight. Be thou my whole armor, be thou my true might. Be thou my soul's shelter, be thou my strong tower. O raise thou me heavenward, great power of my power. This depiction of God as a chieftain or high king is a traditional representation in Irish literature. Medieval Irish poetry typically used heroic imagery to cast God as a clan protector. As the years passed, the tune Slain and the poem Rop tu Mobile fell into obscurity, and whoever wrote them faded away into the fogs of time. But in 1905, nearly 1,500 years after St. Patrick lit a flame on Slane Hill, the forgotten hymn reemerged. Mary Byrne, a 25-year-old university student, discovered the 14th century copy of Rop tu Mobile and translated it into English for the very first time. In that moment, the now almost hallowed lyrics, Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, sprang from the forgotten pages of time and into the modern world. Later, in 1912, an Irish woman named Eleanor Hull set the words to music. The melody she set it to was none other than Slain, the medieval tune written in honor of St. Patrick. The hymn became famous overnight and appeared first in a hymnal in 1919. In 2019, the year before the world went all wobbly, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the modern version of Be Thou My Vision. Why does this matter? The story behind Be Thou My Vision is the story of the gospel. God took what the world ignored and made it something beautiful. As far as humans were concerned, Rop tu Mobile and Slain were dead, nothing more than irrelevant fragments from antiquity. But God took what was dead and made it alive again. God took what was old and made it new. God took dusty pages of lyrics and infused them with new life, just as God can take our lives and infuse them with new spirit. Be Thou My Vision is a song of new life. No one story is done whose pages rest in the hands of God. No song is too old that it cannot be sung again by the choir of God's grace. The mist may descend in the hills, the mossy mountains may crumble and groan, but the grace of God shines brightly as it did on Slane Hill that Easter morning long, long ago.